After the November 2020 election and January runoffs, a few things happened. There were multiple audits in Georgia counties. Former President Donald J. Trump railed against our election system, and the state legislature had a laser focus on what it saw as voter integrity issues. And that last point is what we'll be focusing on today. My name is Joseph, and this is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in Context. Now, if you want to read more on this topic, or you just don't feel like watching me, my colleague Mark Nisi wrote a full story on this. It'll be the first link in the description down below. Now, in March 2021, legislatures passed Senate Bill 202, and Governor Brian Kemp signed that bill into law. This law changes a lot about the mechanics of elections, but this video will focus on three key areas. That is early voting, absentee voting, and vote counting. First is early voting. Now, during the 3 weeks of early voting, election officials can choose to keep polls open for a full 12 hours. That is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Or they can opt for fewer hours. That is 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now, before this new law, early voting was required to be, quote, during normal business hours, but those hours weren't defined. Early voting will also be offered on 2 Saturdays statewide, and local offices have the option of providing hours on Sundays as well. Now, before this law, on 1 Saturday of early voting was required. Next is absentee voting. This time around, in order to request an absentee ballot, voters must provide a driver's license or state ID number. But if you're a voter and you don't have those particular forms of ID, there is still a way for you to get an absentee ballot. You need to attach a photocopy of another form of identification, such as a U.S. passport, military ID, utility bill, or bank statement with your absentee application. Absentee voters are required to provide similar forms of ID when returning the completed absentee ballot. The last 4 digits of a voter's social security number can also be used for ID at this point in the process. Additionally, the timeline to request an absentee ballot has been compressed. Voters must request an absentee ballot at least 11 days before Election Day, and the ballots must be received at local election offices before polls close on November 2nd. In past elections, voters could request an absentee ballot up until the Friday before an election. Another change from the 2020 election is a reduction in the number of absentee ballot drop boxes. This new voting law prohibits drop boxes from being used outside of early voting hours. So if a polling location closes at 7 p.m., you cannot drop off your absentee ballot at 7:30 p.m. And drop boxes can only be used inside of early voting locations. The number of drop boxes in each county is capped at 1 for every 100,000 active voters, or the number of early voting locations, and each county must install at least 1 drop box. And finally, vote counting. This new law requires election workers to count ballots non-stop until they are done, with the exception for reasonable breaks. All absentee ballots must be counted by 5 p.m. on the day after Election Day, with the exception for military overseas and provisional ballots, which can be returned up to 3 days after Election Day. In addition, election officials must provide turnout information on election night. They will report the number of in-person ballots and absentee ballots cast by 10 p.m., according to this new law. Violations could result in a performance review by the state election board. Okay, all of that, and there are still parts of this law we didn't even touch on, such as it is now illegal to hand out food or drinks to voters waiting in line. We will be able to see this new law play out in real time on November 2nd, which is Election Day for the Atlanta mayoral race, and so much more. And now, I want to pass the question off to you. What do you think of these new changes in voting? Does it make it easier to vote? Do you have more faith in our election system now? Why or why not? I'd love to know any and all thoughts in that comment section down below. And hey, while you're down there leaving your carefully worded and respectful comment, go ahead and press that subscribe button if you haven't already. Press the like button if you liked this video. Favorite if you really liked it. But as always, my name is Joseph, and this is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in Context.